Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 10 things junglers do that laners hate. Now, if you guys do enjoy this video, I can do the flip side of it as well, and we could do 10 things laners do that junglers hate, so let me know down in the comments below. But with that being said, let's get started. If you guys haven't entered into the giveaway I'm running right now with RvzStealth either, then there'll be a link down in the description below. RvzStealth is the new coaching brand I am going to be working with, so if you are interested in coaching as well, link will be down in the description below. If you do have any questions at all, then be sure to send me a message over on Discord. So to start things off here, number one is gonna have to do with taxing. So taxing is something that, if you guys don't know what it basically means when somebody comes to your lane. It doesn't even have to be a jungler, but when somebody comes to your lane and takes XP or even takes gold from you. So this happens a lot of time, and sometimes like the jungler won't even realize that he's taxing, or he won't even understand what taxing is. He'll just walk past the lane, take a bunch of XP, and it can really hurt the laner depending on the situation and depending on the lane. Sometimes taxing can be fine. I think that if you're playing a jungler who is a level 6 jungler, if you really need to hit that level 6 and you're very close to it, then I'm fine with you taxing my lane in that situation. But if you're playing a jungler who's not really 6 reliant, or if you end up walking through a very volatile lane, say you end up taxing XP from a Talon versus Zed matchup, and that Zed gets level 6 before the Talon, then he can just all-in Talon at level 6, kill him, and get a snowball going, and just win that matchup because you ended up taxing XP from your laner. So you do have to be careful. I think that in certain situations, it is fine, obviously, to tax from your laner. I think if you end up getting a kill, if you gank the lane, you get a kill, then if he needs help shoving the wave in, obviously help him and tax some XP, even take some gold. I think a pretty good unwritten rule in League is that if the jungler ends up getting the kill on the gank, then he should leave the CS in the wave for his laner. And if the laner gets the kill when the jungler ganks, then the jungler should be fine to take that wave of CS. Obviously, it is going to depend on the champions in the game, going to depend on the state of the game. I think that, for example, if you're playing a tank jungler, if you're not super item and gold reliant, then you should leave the CS pretty much every single time for your laner. But if you're playing a snowbally jungler, if you're looking to 1v9 the game, then I think in that situation it's fine to take the CS. And then vice versa as well. If your top laner is playing like a tank top laner, then it's more so okay for you to take XP and CS in that situation. But if it is more so of a volatile lane, if they are playing a very snowbally champion, then I would be letting them take the CS. So for number two, it has to do with breaking a freeze that your laner has after you do pull off a successful gank. So a lot of junglers, when they end up ganking, after they gank, they just always try to perma shove the wave in. They don't even really look at the lane state. And if your laner does have a freeze for him and he wants to keep that freeze and he's pinging you off the wave, then do not continue to shove that wave into the enemy's tower. A freeze is going to occur if there are 4 or 5 more minions on your team's side than on the enemy team side. So if you do notice that, and if your laner is like pinging you off and telling you not to shove the wave, then it's good to just not shove the wave and leave in that situation. I think a really good example of this and what happens a lot is that if the jungler ends up ganking for top lane, the top laner is really low, but he has teleport and he wants to get a base in. What'll happen a lot of the time is that he'll be trying to base and teleport back and keep his freeze, but the jungler will just be sitting top lane there, pushing the wave in, just taking all of his farm, all of his XP, and that's something that just can be really, really bad. You're just taking so much XP and farm from your laner, and you're also breaking his freeze. So definitely take a look at the lane states after you do end up ganking as a jungler. If there's not a freeze, you can shove the wave into the enemy's tower, but if there is and your laner wants to keep it, then do not break that freeze. Moving on to number 3 now, this is a pretty big one here, and it's invading when no lanes have priority. If you don't know what priority means, it basically means, does your laner have the ability to move before the enemy laner does? A good indication of this is where the wave is in the lane. So if your mid laner, for example, is shoving all the way into the enemy's tower, then he has the priority. He's going to be able to move before the enemy laner. If your laners, though, are shoved into their tower and they're farming under their towers, then they do not have priority, and in that situation, it's going to be very risky for you to look to make an aggressive play. A great example of this is when that early scuttle crab spawns and your jungler just runs into the river, doesn't even take a look at mid lane, doesn't take a look at bot lane, gets collapsed on by the enemy mid and the enemy bot. He ends up dying, he doesn't even get the crab, and he just loses all the tempo in the game. He gives up first blood to the opponent. So some games you're just gonna have to sack that scuttle crab. Not getting the scuttle crab is going to be more worth it than you dying, giving over first blood, and allowing the enemy laners to continue snowballing even harder. So I definitely do have to agree, it can be very frustrating as a jungler when you have to do this, especially if your laners are in matchups to where they should have priority but they don't. That can be very frustrating, but you always do have to take a look at your lane states, play around your lane states when you are looking to make aggressive plays, because if you don't, then you're just gonna end up dying because you're gonna get roamed on in a lot of different situations. And then for number 4, the flip side to this one is when your junglers aren't looking to play aggressive and they aren't looking to invade when their laners do have the priority. If your mid and your bot lane do have priority, if they're shoving all the way into the enemy's tower, then you can look to go for that crab, you can look to make an aggressive play. There's so many games to where I'll be playing mid, I'll be shoving the enemy under tower all game long, and my jungler will just be hard farming his jungle, not even trying to play off the priority. If your mid laner has priority, it pretty much gives you the ability to do whatever you want. Like, you can invade into the enemy's jungle, you can go for that scuttle crab because your mid laner is going to be able to roam first, he's going to be able to help you out, and it's going to be a 1v or it's going to be a 2v1 if you do end up running into that enemy jungler. So just look to play around your lanes if they are playing aggressive, if they do have the priority, because you can just get so much pressure off of that. So for number 5 is when the jungler continues to gank the lane that's losing or continues to play around the losing lane. You don't see this as much in the higher elos, you probably see this more in the lower elos, but a jungler ends up forcing a gank in a lane, he ends up dying to that gank. 2 minutes later, he ganks that lane again, dies again, just keeps ganking this lane over and over, and just ends up dying every single time. And it's just like, man, why are you still ganking this lane? Like, gank the lanes that do have the most amount of CC, gank the lanes that are winning. If you have a winning bot lane, then don't continue trying to go to top lane if your top laner's losing or he's not having a good time. Play around your winning lanes, and that's just gonna give you a much better chance to win. So for number 6 is trying to force objectives when the fight is already lost. Like if it's a 4v5 or something and your jungler is pinging on that dragon trying to get your team to contest it, when there's no real way you end up winning a fight or getting that objective at all. So I think this is something that junglers just have to realize, like in certain situations you're not going to be able to get that dragon. If your teammate ends up getting caught out of position and they end up dying before the dragon, you kind of just gotta give up the dragon. If you give up the dragon, then at least the Baron's still up, you don't end up losing the Baron. You just gotta cut your losses in certain situations. Like if you're playing a jungler who can look to steal dragon and can look to just get into the pit and jump right out right after, then it's fine to look to contest in that situation. But if you're looking for a full-on like 4v5 fight to try to contest that Infernal Drake, then it's just not going to be worth a lot of time, because you lose the Infernal Drake, your whole team ends up dying, you lose the Baron, and you just lose the game off of that. So I think just realizing that in certain situations you're going to have to give up that dragon and give up that objective, that's something that some junglers do definitely struggle with. So back to one that has to do with the laning phase, it's when the jungler ends up just trying to force ganks way too much. If there's just no way a gank is going to be successful, but the jungler just tries to end up forcing the gank, he ends up dying in the 1v1 to the enemy laner, and he pings his laner asking why they didn't follow up. Like there's going to be certain situations to where there's no way that your laner can like follow up on your gank, but the jungler will just continue to try to make that gank work, just force it so hard, and then just end up giving up a kill to the enemy laner. Another really frustrating one is when your jungler tries to gank for you when you have like 2 waves of CS sitting under your tower. You got more than a kill worth of gold sitting there for you to CS under your tower, but your jungler strolls in, he tries to pull off the gank, you leave lane, you leave all that CS under your tower because you want to try to help your jungler with the gank, or he's just going to end up dying to the enemy laner. You end up trying to help him, you don't even get the kill, and you lose the whole wave of CS under your tower. That's like the worst case scenario that could happen. So when you you are ganking as a jungler, you don't have to just walk in and gank immediately when you get to that lane. Sweep the bush. If it's not warded, just sit there, wait for your laner to clear out the wave, wait for him to get all the CS, and then look to pull off the gank, because if you're ganking for lanes that are losing a ton of CS in the process and you're just not getting any kills out of those ganks either, then it can just set you very far behind. So for this next one, it's when junglers don't look to help their laners reset a wave if the enemy does have a freeze. You probably won't see this as much in the lower elos because most players just perma-shove waves in, but in the higher elos, you'll see this quite often to where the enemy laner will get a freeze and your jungler just will sit in his jungle, or he just won't even come around your lane to try to help you break that freeze even if you're calling for assistance. A lot of junglers think the only things they can do for lanes is to pull off a gank and try to get a kill, but that's definitely not the case. If you notice that one of your lanes is getting frozen on and he's in a really bad spot, he has to overextend in lane to try to get CS, then just walk into that lane, help him reset the wave, break the freeze, and it's just going to put him in a much better spot. Just these little things that junglers can do to help laners can make such a big difference, and just resetting a wave, breaking a freeze is something that can be so influential that a jungler can do to help his laner out. So for number 9, it's when the jungler is just hard farming his jungle, or he's not prioritizing a lane when they're getting shoved in over and over, and to when the enemy laner is just overextending throughout the whole laning phase. This can be one that's very frustrating for laners because certain matchups, like they're not going to have the push in lane, the enemy is going to have the push, and they're going to be getting shoved in under tower throughout the whole game. And this is something that should be very easy to capitalize on when you are playing jungle. If you do notice that your laners are getting shoved in under tower, and especially if your laners do have some sort of CC that they can use to lock down the enemy laner, then just look to gank that lane. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but oftentimes you'll see games to where a laner will just get shoved in the entire game and the jungler will just never gank that lane. So just be aware of your lane states and take a look at which lanes are getting shoved in, and if you can gank the lane that's getting shoved in that does have a lot of crowd control, then you're just going to be able to pick up a ton of free easy kills. And then number 10, to round it all out here, is when your jungler does not prioritize dragon when bot lane and mid lane are both winning. So this is something that can be super frustrating as a laner. You're winning lane, you're winning bot lane, but for some reason the enemy jungler ends up taking the early infernal dragon. There should be no way that that ever ends up happening if you're winning mid and you're winning bot, but sometimes that'll happen. The enemy jungler will just sneak the infernal dragon, he'll just take it because your jungler's like on top side farming his jungle, or he's prioritizing top lane when there's an infernal dragon up. So especially if your team is winning, like if your team is not winning, if your bot lane and your mid lane are getting crushed, then yes, it's fine for you to try to prioritize top lane and just give up that dragon if you don't think you can contest it. But if your mid and your bot are both winning, then there should be no way the enemy jungler ever takes an early dragon. So just look to play around that and look to take early dragons if your team is allowing you to. So that is going to be all for the video, guys. Those are 10 things that junglers do that laners hate. So if you guys did enjoy this video and you would like to see me do the flip side of this video to where 10 things that laners do that junglers hate, I can definitely do that one. And if you do have any suggestions for ones that I should include in that video, then let me know down in the comments below. Also, let me know if there's things that you think I should have included in this video that I did not. But with that being said, guys, if you did enjoy, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I'll see you in my next video.